morning. My name is Rachel Carruthers, and I'm the events manager here at the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to IT Basics for Business, a breakfast seminar series that provides a forum to gain useful do-it-yourself IT solutions and insightful, actionable tips. I want to begin by thanking Uprise partners for continuing their support, allowing us to bring you this virtual event yet again this season. This morning's event is the second installment of IT Basics for Business for the 2024-25 event season. So welcome back, everyone, and Happy New Year. This four-part bi-monthly series runs from October through June each season. Today's topic, Emerging IT Trends in 2025, What Your Business Needs to Know, is presented by Brian Gagnon, Chief Technology Officer at Uprise Partners. Uprise Partners is our presenting sponsor of IT Basics for Business since its inception, and we're currently in our third season, I believe. Now, at this time, I'd like to introduce Uprise Partners CEO Melinda Gagnon to the floor to tell us a little bit more about the work that Uprise Partners does.
Thanks so much, Rachel, and good morning, everybody. I want to just introduce Uprise, tell you a little bit about who we are and what we're all about. So we're an IT services company. We're based right here in Maine, and we serve small and medium-sized businesses across the U.S. and now the globe. And we're particularly focused on small and medium-sized businesses because we found through the years working in technology and working with Fortune 500 customers in the past that small, medium-sized businesses are typically underserved when it comes to having a really solid and comprehensive technology partner. So we're proud to grow this in Maine. We're headquartered in Maine, and about a third of our team members are based here. And we actually just had a big hiring push in Maine as well in the new year. I'm proud to say we've been recognized recently, just a couple weeks ago, as Propel's Business of the Year. And part of that recognition was our commitment to Maine. And I want to announce something here this morning that we're really excited about. While we've always supported Maine-based businesses, a significant number of our customers are here in Maine. We want to really double down on our commitment to Maine-based businesses. So I want to announce an initiative that we're calling our Backyard Initiative. We have an IT offering. It's comprehensive. It will absolutely continue to empower businesses not only to grow, but also to sustain their operations in a way that's really critical to not only support their team and our workforce, but also ensure that we can help to really have technology be a strong backbone for Maine-based businesses so we can continue to support our economy. So please reach out if you have any questions. We're really excited to just renew and really invigorate that commitment that we've always had here in Maine. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melinda. Thank you for everything that you do, what Brian, our presenter this morning, does, and the whole Uprise Partners team. We truly value our relationship with you. Moving on, just want to mention that like all the Chamber's virtual signature events, today's presentation is free and will be recorded. It'll be made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, visit our website, portlandregion.com, and check out our events page and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Before we begin today's program, I just want to remind everyone that we are using a platform called StreamYard. This platform provides improved production and interactive elements that truly enhance our virtual events here at the Chamber. On that note, I'd like to point out that when you have questions for our presenter today, you can type them in the YouTube chat. If Brian doesn't get to them during his presentation, I'll relay them to him at the conclusion of the presentation, where we'll also save some time for a formal Q&A session. Now a bit more about this morning's presenter. Brian Gagnon is a seasoned technologist with 25 years of expertise in crafting, expanding, and refining business ecosystems. His areas of specialization include cybersecurity, designing technology infrastructures, and architecting solutions across public, private, and hybrid cloud environments. He is also well-versed in establishing effective data management practices and developing data science platforms. Outside of his work, Brian is quite the outdoorsman, enjoying scuba diving, hiking, and fishing, which of course provide him with that escape from the digital realm. We're very grateful to have him with us this morning. With that, I'll hand the mic over to you, Brian, to kick things off.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning. Hopefully everybody's got a mug of their choice, whether it be Stanley Yeti or something old school. So let's kick this off. And I realize this is actually about an hour later than it was last year, so I can actually sleep in a little, which is great. So today we're going to talk about what's coming down the pipe for 2025 and some of the trends. And what I would say is this is a year of taking a little bit of pause and really looking at priorities and resiliency and a lot of the things that came as threats over the last couple of years, because we moved really fast. Most everybody's business, since 2020, right, has moved incredibly fast, whether you wanted it to or not. So here we are in 2025. I'm pretty sure 2025 is the year that Marty put in the Back to the Future car. Might have been 2024, but I think it's 2025, like when they went back to the future and such. So here we go. And so as far as the trends, we're going to talk more about some of the business trends versus just the straight up technology trends, right? There's all kinds of cool stuff, but I try to limit the flashy things and stay to the things that if you're running a business, you care about. So the number one thing that's on the list, and we're seeing this on Forbes, we're seeing this all over, pretty general statement, right? Cybersecurity is no longer just something that you say, oh yeah, we've got that, and then you move on and then you don't worry about it. So cybersecurity is making its way to the C-level, the CEOs, the owners, the board, and more importantly, the financiers and people insuring you and customers. They care now, right? And they might even be asking many of you, hey, what's your cybersecurity plan look like? Or what do you guys put in place to do X, Y, and Z with my data? This is becoming a lot more of a critical event because everybody from Microsoft to Marriott to Delta to you name it in the last year has been greatly affected, and they have greatly affected all of us, right? So with that being said, when you start to think of 65% of board members are now saying, geez, I'm worried about the organization being at risk, that's a pretty big canary in a coal mine, right? And these typically, obviously, companies that have boards, they may be larger size companies, but we do need to pay credence to what they're doing and pay attention to, threats in general, right? So when you look at things from ransomware to people clicking on the wrong links, that stuff has evolved. It's evolved greatly. That used to be the strategy that worked for that was, hey, let's put antivirus on there. And if somebody downloads a file that they shouldn't, let's make the file go away. Well, now people are using AI to actually enhance just how they speak to us, right? So things that, looked like an Amex statement before and had a ton of misspellings and, it just looked really wonky. That used to be the really easy way to figure it out and say, oh, geez, this is wrong. Now stuff is starting to look really, really good because just like many of you, everybody else is using ChatGPT or some variant of that, right? So that's actually making this much, much more, tricky to work around. We still, to this very day, though, have customers and have people that we advise that say things like, yeah, that's all good. We do MFA, but my whole team hates MFA. It's so cumbersome and they don't want to do it, right? That's not really like much of an option. There are options around that, but they get really expensive. And when you start to talk about, well, we could do this and do that, people start to realize, okay, the cost here is really skyrocketing. And this is being an IT professional and having to advise people on this. I'm not making the prices on this. This is just the ecosystem in general needs to be a lot more sophisticated. That's raising the prices. So, with that all being said, that's why boards are starting to ask these questions as well, because they want to make sure that your customers, before they get to the point of like, you've got a big deal coming down, and then they say, oh, wait a minute, how are you handling cybersecurity? That's not always the greatest place to be. So they're trying to get out ahead of that, right? And that's what we do as well. We're trying to get out and get our customers out ahead of problems before they become problems, and try to get resilient to get back to normal. So that's really a pretty big one. And so if you're not thinking in on the regular as the owner of a company, CEO of a company, if you're not bringing up in your meetings with your executives, what is our policy on cybersecurity, and having a little bit of a discussion. I'm not saying have a whole discussion, but having a little bit of a discussion about what are our plans? How do we do that? Do we have that? And it's okay if the answer is no, but you need to know what you have and what you don't have. So this is a really great place to start building things that you can measure towards and improve towards. That's what we do with a lot of customers that, they might come to us and maybe they didn't have an IT professional and now they need help. You can't run to, hey, this is like the Pentagon over here. That would be really expensive. There's about 1 million steps in between there where we can help them get to where they need to be. But the key is like having a good plan and moving towards a plan and keep checking away at things. So at the board level, at your exec levels, be having these conversations and ask the questions. How do we handle cybersecurity? How do we handle an outage? Those are important questions. So moving along, and I put the slide up 1 million times. 43, 45%. It says 43, but I just want to round to 45. It just feels better. So, 45% of cybersecurity, attacks happen in the 35 million small businesses out there. Why? Because there's 35 million businesses out there. Also, they know that there is much, much, much less money spent in this space. So it's kind of like throwing a dart. Where do you go? Like if you're prospecting for your business and you're looking for new business, where do you go? Do you go to the place where you're going to find customers, or do you go to some obscure place where you're probably not going to see there's one business there and you drive 2 hours to go get it? You're going to probably go where the getting is good. Cybersecurity people, same thing. They cyber criminals, I would say, tend to be lazy, right? They tend to get a list. They look through the list. They come back the next day, the next week, the next whatever, and they say, okay, great. We've got this whole list of businesses that look like they're not patched. All right. So a week from now, we're going to go back again at 2 a.m. and we're going to see what else do they have? Do they have no patch, but then they also don't have a firewall? And then they're going to make another list. And then eventually they're going to come back and they're just going to literally run a spreadsheet and they're going to attack like 2,500 or 25,000 or 250,000 businesses all at once. They're not going to care if you're Brian's Bait and Tackle in Bethel, Maine, or you're, Dick's Sporting Goods in Portland. They're not going to care. They're just going to literally go through their list and they're going to, get in or they're not, right? So that's why we're seeing this huge thing. And if they know that businesses might not, have a proclivity to spend money on things, they're going to go after that. So that's where I'm just trying to bring the awareness that if you're not having regular conversations about this, and these breach numbers, 9.4 million, when you start thinking about lost time, lost productivity, having to circle back. So a lot of these attacks are really hard to rid, right? So we have to spend a bunch of time not only like inoculating, against it and trying to get rid of it, but it's kind of like a bad persistent cold. Just when you think you got rid of it, somebody turns something else on, and now all of a sudden you're potentially attacked again. So it's way easier to prevent versus, deal with the attack. So that's why we see these numbers just so high at this point. So, and if you think about it, most people, you're worried about ransomware. We've all heard about it. Many places have had it. It's a bugger, they encrypt your stuff and make it go away. I've had customers get phone calls where their phone number was on a list, right? So on the dark web, I could probably go on for everybody that's on this call, I could probably find a cell phone number for you, right? And that's what they're doing. And then they're calling and saying, hey, I have a whole bunch of your information, and they might feed a tiny little bit of information to make you nervous. And then they're trying to extract money from you, right? So they're really up in their game. They're using voice technologies to like enable and emulate other people's voices. Cyber fraud is just like rife with this stuff, and then you get into some of the other pieces like disinformation, people inside and malicious insiders, and that's something to think about these days. There's a lot of people that I think we probably all know, right? Return to work, return to office. There's a lot of people that their world is changing a little bit, right? And that's causing trials and tribulations. It opens up the door for somebody to be malicious and potentially attack you from inside. So making sure that you have those good controls is always key, right? So when we think about that, that's key. But what's driving this, right? AI, I've talked about this a lot. Very simply, it's basically emulating a human in the responses. It's getting really good at this point. There's also some places that I would say caution. Just going out and buying air quotes buying AI could be an expensive venture without really planning. I will tell everybody this. We went out and purchased for our whole team, for instance, a bunch of different AI platforms so that they could do different things. One of which we used about half of the time. It was really expensive for a year, but we really did need to try it before we, recommended it to folks. So we pushed it out there. And what I would say is it cost us a lot of money because we didn't fully utilize it. Other platforms we fully utilized. So I just say that, and that when you're thinking about AI, both on the positive side and the threats that it delivers, you got to think all the way through and have a plan for it, just like anything, right? AI is fantastic, but just saying, hey, we're going to just push this out to everybody and assume that everybody adopts it. Everybody thinks a little bit differently, not only about AI, but it takes some engagement to truly get people using that innovation and understanding how to use it. Example, if you're using ChatGPT, you might say something like, I need to create a spreadsheet that keeps track of the software applications that we use and what our responses are for all those in the event of a outage, right? You might go do that. That may come across and it may come out okay, but you really need to still do your homework. Just because you're using the calculator to help come up with the math, you still need to double check it, right? So you might do a first pass of that. It may put some things in there that are helpful. It may put some things in there that are a complete miss. And really a key part of AI is making sure that you're continuing to train your model and with your information. And if you're using your information, if it's private internal information, making sure that you have the security controls so that it's not just ending up out on the internet. There is no privacy assertion of putting something into AI and not thinking it might come out somewhere else, right? You have to think about those things unless you put the security, permissions in place to make sure that that is okay. So that's, high level. So when we think of, and I've talked about this before, I'm just going to hit this, briefly. You got narrow AI and you got general AI. Gen AI is the one I think everybody's talking about today. There's a lot of really great places as a business, though, where narrow AI works really well. And what that means is things or places where it is very narrow and very specialized, and it doesn't require a lot of compute. It doesn't require a lot of expense. That might be something like my door at my house. Every day at 5 o'clock, I want it to like unlock when I get near with my Wi-Fi device, and I want it to turn on the lights. You know, that might be something that is very, very narrow in its application, but that is a really huge thing, and that could be a really great thing. That would be the Alexas, the Siris, the everything else, right? That's a great example of that. That's a great thing. Give that a try. Try it at home. You could do that, in your own home with just a light bulb and whatever. There's tons of options out there. As a business, you may want to do something like that where you use camera technology to take pictures of something going by on a production line, and every so often recommending one that goes to quality control, right? That's narrower, very focused. I'll tell you, when you start saying manufacturing, obviously manufacturing companies that build the technologies put a premium on that stuff because they know how much that means to a business, so they match the value up with the value it's bringing you. So that's not going to be maybe a cheaper option, but that might be really helpful in your business versus, hey, let's get Gen AI, and anytime somebody calls and sends an email, we're just going to have a robot like basically respond to all those things and just hope that it's all going to go really well without training it and that, right? That takes a lot more work. It takes a lot more handholding and really making sure that your quality is there, when you could be doing something in the narrow space that actually brings AI to your business and actually helps your profit margins or helps your quality or any number of things. So just a couple different ways to think about that so that it's not all, hey, Siri, show me this and that, right? That's nice, but let's stay focused on the things that can like bring business in the door and like truly help business. The flip side of that is, and this is the good and the bad, Gen AI tools, like I was talking about, criminals are using that now. There are literally platforms where if you're a lazy coder, which most criminals tend to be on the lazier side because working's a little harder. So let's do it the easy way, right? So they're gonna go out. They might use a as a service platform that literally allows them to plug in a whole bunch of devices or companies that they know about that they want to research. Tomorrow they might come back. That list might be filled out. They might take that list, they might plug it into something else, and then they may go and start launching attacks and seeing what they can get into. And then they might even use a service that writes really nice messages to you that make you all nervous, make your C-level all nervous, and get you to fork over a whole bunch of money to a nondescript account somewhere. So these are the types of things that we're up against. And I notice from 2023, 2024, 2025, the level of not only paranoia, but the level of just concern in many customers, right, is really elevated. Meaning, hey, we got this message that came in. It looks bogus. Why is that? Right? These are great questions, right? But the one thing that I will throw out there is this is evolving. We cannot we cannot, as well as really software companies that are defending against this, it's really hard to stay ahead of the thing that we invented to make it easier for everybody, meaning AI, right? So there's new challenges, there's new ways to basically stay ahead of that. But there are definitely times and places where seeing some of these threats, it's not that something went wrong, it's that they tweaked something, right? And they're able to like get a message to you. The key still exists in the hands of all of our employees, though, which is don't open things that you might not recognize, don't open things that you may not be expecting, don't open things that look silly and that take you to a place that you probably don't want to be from an email. So, with all that being said, our people are still really important to invest in and making sure that they know some of these techniques and some of the landscape, right? Because the landscape is changing, and this is definitely a key thing that we're running into. So, if anybody has questions with that, by all means, light it up in the comments. Happy to visit that here in a little bit. When you think about what people are really like starting to be concerned about, let's face it. If you don't know what deep fakes are, it's basically taking somebody. It would be like taking my voice, taking my likeness, and making that into not me to get somebody to respond to me, right? This is happening at the level of the president of the country all the way to our small business, right? So it's things that you have to look into, things that you have to worry about, and things that you have to have a plan for. For instance, if somebody calls our finance person and says, hey, I want to take our bank account, we need to change that, please change it to this. Okay, sounds great. We have a bunch of processes that I won't talk about in ways that we can verify that, double check that, and triple check that to make sure indeed that was a correct request. Because it's not enough to just say, oh, Joey just called, it sounded like Joey, he even was on video and it looked like Joey, and he said a couple basic things, but he needed the bank account changed. These are things that we're starting to think about because this isn't like totally prevalent everywhere, but it's something that you have to think about, that people faking voices, people faking faces, and all of that is a thing that many people are worried about. It's not quite here yet in widespread prevalence, but that doesn't mean that 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months from now it couldn't, because things are moving really fast. With that being said, there's also ways to prevent against that or to mitigate that that are being worked on right now. So the hope is that this is a whole cat and mouse game. The industry, the cybersecurity industry, staying ahead of this, really important. So the bigger things, though, so while that is something to think about, phishing, and all of that, and deep fakes, and you name it, data leaks, way more important, right? And it's not through Gen AI. Like, yes, that is something to worry about. You need to have a plan and a policy for what type of information goes into Gen AI. But when you think about data leaks, just in general, data getting out, you want to be careful of where it goes, who has access to it, what your policies are, and who has access to it. Those are much more relevant than probably, deep fakes at this point. So it's funny that, over twice, folks are worried about that. But data leaks and things like just regular security governance are pretty low on the list in comparison. So what I would say is make sure you always think, what is our data governance? If I have a chunk of data, how does it get collected? Where do we store it? How do we treat it? How important is it? And what would happen if it ended up on the Sun Journal, or the Press Herald or whatever, right? In asking those questions, kind of working backwards, you start to build your security plan and you start to put the relevance and how important it would be to protect against that. And then when you have that, we could start to build a governance plan and like how you govern that data and who gets access to it, how it gets stored, how it gets deleted, how long it stays alive, if it stays alive. All of those things, you can have a really good plan and work backwards from that. These are probably much more relevant than somebody, faking my face and my voice. That's still important though, because if somebody calls like our service desk, right, and says, hey, I'm so-and-so and I need my password reset, we can't just take that for granted anymore. We have to look a number of different ways to make sure indeed we have many factor authentication before we just go and do things like that. So just a few things to think about. Lastly, resilience planning and making sure that your business has resiliency. I can't say this enough. This is way more important than cybersecurity, in my opinion. This is way more important than AI and any of those things, because these are the basic underpinnings. And I'm going to just say they invented this a long time ago when the network and internet and all that came about, right? Everything with the internet was so redundant because it was built by DARPA, right? They were building it for defense purposes. So a lot of pieces of this were really resilient. And then over time, things moved faster and faster and faster. And some of that resilience went away. A really great place to look at this, if there's anybody from Spectrum on the line, they'll probably not like this so much, but think about this. Back when we had a phone line at our house, which I don't have one, most people don't, but if you did, every time you picked up the phone, there was what? A dial tone, 48 volts of dial tone. They were regulated to have that critical service going at mostly all times. So that was a great thing. We just grew to expect that. You rarely lost the telephone. I can't think of a time I ever heard somebody say, we lost the telephone. We lost the internet, right? Why do we lose the internet? Well, things changed. We went to DSL, and then that, split the phone line into internet and phone. Okay, cool. We're still using some of that phone technology. They still have batteries and generators and the whole 9 yards. And so you're still getting some of that benefit. Then all of a sudden, you look and you say, geez, I can get DSL, but I can get 10 megabits and it's going to be like $50. Or I could get for $50, I could get 1 gigabit from Spectrum. Let's do that. It makes total sense. So now you go and you get Spectrum, and then you're 2 seconds into a windy Maine day. Any other place they call it a hurricane. Here in Maine, it's like 75-mile-an-hour winds. Not a big deal. Just shovel anyway. And so with that being said, the wind comes up. We get a little dust up like we do here in Maine. 2 or 3 branches fall down and Spectrum's out. And now we're like, oh no, not only am I, stuck at home, but now I can't play games. I can't watch Netflix and all of these things. What happened? Well, that's what happened. They're not at the same, this needs to be critical infrastructure. They don't have to do all those things. They don't have big generators all over the place like telephone, right? So that's one of those pieces where resilience has been built out of the system a little bit, because we all look for the deal and then we wonder, hey, why isn't there some fault tolerance here like there used to be? Well, that's why. So resiliency in a business is the same. Us being able to make sure that you have that in a business doesn't come at zero cost. It's always going to cost more up until the point that you're able to recover from that and get your customers back doing what your customers need to do. So there is one of those pieces that need to be, and again, this is at the board level, the C level, is having a good plan and a good resiliency plan makes it a lot easier to have business conversation about what happens when we lose this critical piece of software. It might not be enough to get it up and going tomorrow. It might be we need to get this up in 2 hours or less. Well, that's gonna have more implications from a technology perspective to make that happen than it would just to be up tomorrow and making sure that things are up tomorrow. But making sure that there's a good a recovery plan and resiliency really is key. And this is something that you really need to be thinking about as a business, because there's more ways than ever that can take you down. And just putting like a one piece of, putting in a redundant, firewall that has 2 internet feeds may be enough, but it might not be, depending on what's behind that and what is powering both of those. I have literally gone into some of the biggest data centers in the world. Some of the largest ones use 150 megawatts an hour to power the data center. They have a ton of power. They might have Grand Coulee Dam in Washington as primary source and a nuclear power plant as a backup, because they can't even take the time or the worry that like water goes away or there's a problem with the dam or whatever. They have massive, fault tolerance. Me as a small business, there's some basic things I could do. I could maybe plug my firewall and my router into two different power supplies. One might be battery, one might be into the wall, and they're into different circuits. That's like table stakes, right? But there's a lot of those things that IT professionals forget sometimes. They spend all the money on the firewall and doing all this, and then they plug it into the same wall outlet, right? So these are things that as business owners, you just sort of have to start thinking about. Even if you're not in IT, you just have to think about what is the resiliency plan. And I think that gets us all to a really great place. This is the other piece. When you think of the two, there's resiliency and disaster recovery. Resiliency is, and if you think about this like 2 libraries across town, we have a book. It's a cat in the hat, right? And so from a resiliency standpoint, we say, hey, we want to have the cat in the hat always available to all of the readership in our town. So we put 2 copies, one in each location. And if the library, God forbid, had a fire event and they had to close for a week, you could always go to the other library and you've got some resiliency. You've got the ability to withstand an outage, right? So you go over there, but maybe there's a reason that you had 2 libraries, right? And maybe there's a reason you had 2 copies, because there's a lot of people in town and Cat in the Hat is just flying off the shelves. And so now you go to the other library and you say, hey, do you have that book? The answer is yes, I have that book, but it's checked out for the next 8 weeks because the other library burned down, right? So when you start thinking about that, there is a piece of, yes, it's resilient. Yes, there is a copy of the Cat in the Hat, but now you're in a queue and it's a lot longer than you thought or were planning on, and that may not work very well. Disaster recovery is the act of being able to just get that library back up and going, maybe order all new books, purchase all of that and get that stood up at some point. Disaster recovery is important, but having resiliency so that on the fly you can, make some adjustments really is pretty important, because most of the time disaster recovery is just that. You're rebuilding a data center, you're restarting stuff, you're spending an awful lot of money to stand up a whole new infrastructure. So I just wanted to kind of point out sort of the two differences. They get confused a lot. But you want to think about both. You want to have a disaster recovery plan for when it really goes bad. But more importantly, what's the resiliency plan? What happens if email goes down? Do we have a backup? What happens if the credit card machine goes down? Do we have one that we can pull out and chunk, do the old school thing? I don't even think they put numbers on cards anymore, so you can't put chunk anymore. So there's that. Things like that we got to think about. So when you think about it too, we're talking small to mid-sized businesses. I don't love charts. I didn't make this chart. This is from the World Economic Forum. They know more than I do about economics, a lot. But when you look at this, up and to the right is not good on this chart. So basically, if you're in a small organization, in 2025, 35% of them are saying we are struggling to keep up, right? Versus large organizations, they're actually getting better. They spend a lot more money because they have boards, because they have investors, and sometimes that forces them to do things that a smaller business may not have to do. We could take chances. So I just say this and use this as an example. The feeling out there is that the struggle is real, and cyber resilience and just resilience in general isn't getting better. It's getting worse in a lot of cases. So that's why these couple things are really important to sink your teeth into, put your eyeballs into, and talk to the leaders at your company and start having a plan, right? If you get to the point too that you're like, hey, I don't totally know the plan. This is stuff we help with all day long. Not to like put a shameless plug in there, but call us. This is stuff we can talk through with you. Even if it's a couple hours, we could talk through and at least get you pointed in the right direction. Can't save everything in a couple hours, but we could get you pointed in the right direction and at least get you thinking about the right things. So just something to think about there. And when you think about it, right, these numbers are absolutely staggering. 71% of people believe that small organizations have already hit the tipping point where they're way behind. And that's a staggering number. And I see it day to day. We work with a lot of small businesses, and I know that they're moving fast. They think that they have X, they think they're secure on this or that, and that, hey, we spent the money on that, we shouldn't have to spend any more money. And that may be true, but that may also not be true. We've had customers say things like, hey, we don't want to do the wiring project, but let's do a project that puts a new firewall in because that will keep us secure. But then they don't get good performance because we couldn't do the wiring project. It was the wiring project and the firewall project. It wasn't the wiring project or the firewall project. So just think about some of those things and ask those deeper questions about, are these things, separate, or are these things like a combo meal here? Do we need it? Do we need it all? Because it's important to understand that, especially as you look at cybersecurity and performance and resiliency. So here is a quick little list. I've given this out before. I'm going to give it out again. Go through this list with your executive team, right? Like figure out, what do these things cost? What does the data cost? Does it matter? There's a lot of data that we all capture that may or may not matter. If it's not something that you think you're going to be able to monetize or go back to or do something with, does it have the value that you need? If it doesn't, don't keep it. Don't hold on to it. Don't just keep data for the sake of keeping data. Don't be a data hoarder, is what I always say. It gets really expensive because you have to back it up. You have to make it resilient. You have to have a disaster recovery plan, ... And I don't want to sell you things that you don't need if you don't need them, right? I want to sell you things that you need as an IT professional. So just think about that, and that, do we really need this data? Is this something down the road that we could use that would be helpful? And what What level of business do we need to sustain? Should the data go away? Like, how bad is this going to hurt? You know, and what are you willing to invest? You know, being able to get to the point where you can do a little bit of back of the napkin math, which is, hey, getting all of these business leads equal this much, you know, every month, or this much every year. And this is what it kind of costs to us. If we lost all of these leads, boy, that's a pretty big hole in things. And we have to like start over. What's that cost? Okay, great. It costs $500K, let's say. I'm not saying run out and spend $500K, right? But that gives you a really great place to say, okay, the economic cost is $500K. We can't spend $500K to make $500K. So like, let's work back and let's figure out a place where we can save a reasonable amount of money to just make that important. Don't spend money on things that you don't need, and make sure that you frequently like look at this stuff. Changes. So those are kind of some of the big tips, right? When we think of 2025 and the leadership focus, just looking at my time. All right, doing okay. When I look at 2025 and in leadership focus, really making sure that your IT professional, whether it be internal, external, what have you, they need a seat at the table. They need to be able to talk about some of these things. And what I would say is, this isn't a fear tactic. This is where they need to educate you on what is out there, how do you prevent against it, and not how much it's going to cost to fix it, but pushing you and challenging you to make sure that you understand the economic value of what it is you're trying to protect. If you don't have a conversation around that, I don't know how you can have the other conversation with how much something costs. That's just throwing, you know, bad money after good money, or whatever that saying is. So with that being said, you know, staying agile and staying up to date. Pick one thing every month that you read, even if it's just one article that's a tech article. You know, you could go to CIO magazine. They all have like online things, CRN. There's a bunch of different free online resources. Go read one article and read one about something about some new technology. It could be AI. It could be cyber threats. It could be, you name it. Take the time, re-educate yourself, tell your team to re-educate themselves. These things matter. And staying up to date is not just us, the IT professionals' job. You as an executive or a business owner really need to stay like up to snuff on this stuff, because it's changing and it really is sneaking its way in, and it's very important in most people's businesses at this point. You know, leading by example. One thing that I always say is, and I will occasionally do this on purpose, I will leave my computer unlocked. There are 2 or 3 people that walk by my desk, and I'm always looking to see who locks my computer. This is the culture. It's not like when I was more childish, we would put background screensavers on there that were ridiculous. I'm way past that now. But with that being said, for our culture, we make sure that if somebody sees an unlocked computer, you lock that thing up. I don't care if the person just got up for a second, just lock it. These are small little things that we can get our teams doing that can actually save somebody, the UPS guy to whoever walking through. And it sounds so small. The UPS folks could show up and they could see an open computer. They're not like trying to like crack into your internet. They're not sliding down on a rope into a room with like lasers and stuff. This isn't Mission Impossible. All they're doing is they're going online and they're going to like read the sports picks, or they're going to like message somebody or whatever. They're not setting out to do something bad. And then they click on one link. And then something bad happens. And guess what? They pack it all up, they get in the big brown truck, and they go away until tomorrow. And then you're left to pick up all the pieces and wonder what the heck happened. So just think about these little things, how that little cyber culture could actually save you from a pretty expensive event. So just think about those little things. Making sure that you invest in internal and external resources. If you don't have them, call us. Call other cyber professionals. It's fine. But call somebody. If you don't have a CIO, CTO, CISO, what is the CISO? CISO is Chief Information Security Officer. It's a fancy word for somebody also paying attention to your data and where it goes and all of those things that we talked about earlier. Let's have a conversation about those things. If you don't know if you have a plan, the first step of not having a plan is admitting you don't have a plan, because then you can make really fast strides and you can get people aligned on really thinking about this. So if you have internal folks, it is okay if it's somebody that's just been your IT provider for like a long time and that's like what they've done. Ask them. Ask little test questions. What have you done to keep your skills up? What do you read on a regular basis? And if their answer is like, hey, I don't always have the time to read all this stuff, what I would say, maybe then start thinking about, let's get a little bit of an external helper here, because this stuff is important. This isn't just plain old IT and making the laptops run on time. This is your business strategy and making sure that cybersecurity, resiliency, AI, and things like that really have a strong, forward-looking plan here. So, we're always happy to help with things like that. And that's what I got. I'm going to now poke over to the questions because I can't read, talk, and chew bubblegum all at the same time. Let's see. Right. All right. Somebody says, you mentioned having our CISO, CTS, or CTO, CIO join leadership meetings. What if we don't have somebody in that role? Great question. So, and I put this in there on purpose. Many businesses, let's say under 100 people, probably don't have any one of those positions. Somebody in the 100 to 200, maybe 300 might have a CIO who is sort of in charge of IT, probably don't have a CISO. So what I would say is find somebody that does this stuff and have them come in. And even if it's just 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever, have them come in and give you kind of like a health check, but also talk through some of these things to really get a plan, right? And I think that's like a good stepping stone. And what I would say is it is way cheaper to do that than to hire that person also. If I had a couple 100-person business, I wouldn't have all three of those for sure. That'd be a really, really, really expensive IT infrastructure with people included. What would you recommend for somebody that wants to get into cybersecurity? Great question. I recommend this to everybody. Read everything that you possibly can on the cybersecurity front. Also, CompTIA has a really, really good program called Security Plus. Go and start reading about that and studying for that. The act of doing just that, it's a very good generalization. It's not gonna automatically make jobs fall out of the sky like anything, but it's a really great place to start and to get going. Also, CMCC, SMCC, USM, a number of the universities in Maine. Luckily, there's a lot of really great places to educate yourself. Go to those and see what they have for cybersecurity programs. I know those three that I just threw out there all have that. And that's a good hands-on program, because with cybersecurity, you've got to get hands-on with stuff. If you're not touching different computers and trying different things and what have you, you're going to get a good education, but you really need to like get your hands on and do some labs and stuff like that. Let's see. I think that's about it. Oh no, more things are piling in. Hold on. What would you say the most important piece of these new trends to take away and focus on as we begin 2025? Awesome question. So let's like boil it down. I would say we're coming off of a pace in IT that has not been seen in a long time. That is COVID time, right? We went from all of a sudden one day, everybody's reporting to home in their slippers. And we've got VPNs, we've got security things that are maybe suspect or what have you. And then IT professionals got really scarce because everybody's scattered all over the place. And so I would say the biggest thing is circling back. This is the time to circle back. Make sure that you have, and start with the business perspective. Look at the key pieces of your business and figure out, how is it protected? What is the important data? How is it protected? What happens if there's an outage? How is it protected? What about things from the past? We opened up the internet so that everybody could dial in from home. Is that critical to your business? Or was that something that you did because everybody reported to home, right? And these are the types of things that we need to think about, right? Because I will say, I've seen a lot of, and I'm not going to call it shoddy, when you only have so much time and everybody's like, we need everybody to be home immediately. What happens? You turn on the levers and you pull the button or whatever. You push the buttons and pull the levers to like get that to work. It might not necessarily mean you did all of the due diligence. You did some of the due diligence. So now is the time to go back and ask the hard questions. Hey, I know we did this 4 years ago. What did we do then? Did we have a plan? Can you show me the plan? Now we're in a different place. Does everybody still need to be remotely accessing the server, or does everybody need to remotely access Salesforce? Do they need all of that data? Like, these are the types of questions that need to be focused on. So resiliency and also revisiting plans and business plans. 100% 2025, that's what I would focus on. I wouldn't focus on AI. I wouldn't focus on all of those newfangled technologies until you get this stuff documented. That is critical. I don't care. You can get a whole new firewall, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, you name it. If you don't have a plan and you revisit what you did before and then have a plan on like what hurts your business and what helps your business, it's going to be really hard to like pivot from that and make sure that you're spending your time and money on the things that really grow your business. 2025, hands down, that's what I'd spend the money on. Anybody have any other questions?
I think that might be it for this morning.
That's good, because my voice is about spent. I need more coffee. Even though I got an extra hour, it just means like I need more coffee to move faster.
Yeah,
So,
I know. Same. I need to remember not to drink too much before these virtual events where I'm like sitting still, engaging with the training, because I started getting a little bit jittery. And I need to hydrate with some more water, not coffee. Yes.
well, thank
Brian,
you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Great questions this morning. It's funny when you were talking about even this simplicity of when you leave your desk, locking your computer. I'm an offender of not doing that. And actually, I am in most cases the problem. I like to think that I'm pretty tech savvy and understand, how things work. Having grown up, in my education and hopping right into the workforce in my 20s, technology was at the forefront of my life, and yet I still struggle to, maybe I'm a little naive of those who are constantly,
It's okay, Rachel.
constantly trying to attack us. But yeah, I'm still getting better. I'm improving with your help, with internally some of the staff here at the chamber, I've much improved.
Just remember, I'm the problem. It's me.
Yes, I am. It's funny. I was thinking that line as you were saying that. For those who don't know, everyone attending, before we got on the call, we sang a little line from some Taylor Swift songs. So, yes, I am the problem when it comes to cybersecurity. But yes, thank you so much, Brian. That was a wonderful presentation. Great questions from everyone who attended this morning. We've had yet another wonderful IT Basics for Business presentation from Uprise Partners. And thank you, of course, to my chamber colleague, Riley Legier, for helping to produce yet another successful virtual event here at the chamber. And last, but certainly not least, a big thank you for each of you for attending today and throughout the season. If you're interested in learning a bit more about today's topic and continuing that conversation with Brian, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with links to additional resources. And another shout out, of course, to our sponsor, Uprise Partners, for their support and continued contributions to the IT Basics for Business series. We look forward to seeing you back here on April 29th for another informational episode of IT Basics for Business brought to you by Uprise Partners. All right, everyone, thanks again for attending. Stay warm and enjoy the rest of your day.